Good afternoon. Coming to you by way of tape. It is Wednesday afternoon, and we are going to be studying another lesson from Hebrews chapter 11. It has been a good series. I do believe this will be the last lesson in that series. The lesson will be taken from Hebrews chapter 11, verse 30 and 31, where that we are shifting our attention to Joshua and the walls of Jericho. It says, by faith the walls of Jericho fell down after they were encircled for 7 days. By faith the harlot Rahab did not perish with those who did not believe, but when she had received the spies with peace. She is set out as an example of those in the city who did believe and was thus saved. So our method here is to look at the record here of, in this case, the walls of Jericho falling, and try to examine ourselves, our faith, as compared to that demonstrated in this lesson. I'm tempted to say this story, but as I was reading and researching, I found a lot of people who think of it as being a story, something that was made up. Specifically, they believe it was made up later to show that Israel had a right to this territory based upon this taking of the city of Jericho. But as we study this, I think you'll see that indeed it is historical. That was based on archaeology, by the way, some discoveries there. And the discovery was true and accurate enough, except the interpretation of it was not. So in later years, they came back and studied that further and did more archaeological discoveries. It was found that indeed the biblical record was true. Not that we need that to support our faith, but it is good to know that was laid to rest. When Israel is being led out of Egypt by Moses, they've crossed the Red Sea and they have began to embark upon their journey to the land of Canaan, the promised land. But as soon as they started out, they were attacked by Amalek. It says he came up and attacked them from behind. When he did so, Moses asked Joshua to go out and to fight against Amalek, which he did, and he defeated him. Moses takes the children of Israel forward. They go to the doorstep of the land of Canaan. However, they were not able to enter, as you know. When they got there, they sent 12 spies, including Joshua. But when they came back, the 10 spies said they could not enter it. As a result of this, they spent 40 years wandering in the land of Canaan. It was Joshua who said that God has said we can do this and we ought to move forward. That is noteworthy, because what you're seeing is the training of Joshua. Joshua didn't just stand up one day and say, hey, I'm going to be the leader. Nor did God tell Moses, or Moses decided on by himself one day. Joshua's a pretty good guy. Let's put him in charge. Joshua, you can see, well, here's 40 years back, was already one of the representatives of a tribe as a spy. Almost from the beginning, Joshua was one of those depended on by Moses, getting military experience, leading Israel in what they are doing. So now that they've spent that 40 years, they're making a second attempt to enter the land of Canaan. And as they near this time, Moses is told that he can go and look at the land. In Deuteronomy chapter 9, verses 1 and 2, Moses tells Israel that they're going to cross over the Jordan, and when they do, they're going to go into dispossessed nations that are greater and mightier than yourself, and they're going to have cities that are great and fortified. He says, up to the heavens. That's going to be kind of a description of what they're going to see first in the walls of Jericho. Huge walls, very high, just as Moses has predicted. So when they come to this place, it is described many times. It's only 13 miles away from where they are camping, 6 miles on the other side of the Jordan. So when they cross the Jordan, they only have 6 miles before they're going to actually reach the city of Jericho and the walls of Jericho. So it's described in that way as being in the plains of Moab on the side of the Jordan across from Jericho. Numbers 22 and 26, 31, 33, 34, 35, 36, all mention that same phrase. And so you can see quite often in preparation for their going forward into Jericho, for taking the city of Jericho, they're reminded it's right over there. It's just across the river. They were adjacent to it for a great long period of time. So now then, as they're getting ready to go, Moses is still in charge, and God calls Moses to come upon to the mountain. He is told to go up from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo. This in Deuteronomy 34, 1 through 4, where he says, it's across from Jericho. The Lord showed him all the land of Gilead as far as Pisgah, which is across from Jericho, as far as Dan, all Naphtali, and all the land of Ephraim and Manasseh, all the land of Judah as far as the western sea, the south, and the plain of the valley of Jericho, the city of palm trees, as far as Zoar. The Lord said to him, this is the land which I swore to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, I will give it to your descendants. I have caused you to see with your eyes, but you shall not cross over there. This was the last opportunity Moses would have as a leader. He goes up, he looks at all the land from one vantage point. He can look out all over the land. It is somewhat like being in Chattanooga and going up there to where you can see Lookout Mountain, and it says you can see 7 states from one particular point, 120 miles away. You may have to have binoculars, but you can see a great distance away from that vantage point. So Moses is able to see it, but then he dies at this point, and the leadership is given over to Joshua. Joshua chapter 1 and verse 2, the Lord says to Joshua, rise and go over the Jordan to the land that I'm going to give you. So he crosses over the Jordan. That is, I guess, a lesson within itself, what they did there. But our lesson takes us on across to the walls of Jericho. So after he crosses, he sends 2 spies forward and tells them to look at the land, the purpose of which is to develop a military plan for taking the land. Unbeknown to Joshua, the Lord already had the plan set, and all he needed to do was carry out the plan. But these 2 men go in. They go into Jericho. They enter the walls of Jericho. And as they go there, they find a person of great interest by the name of Rahab. Specifically, her name is called Rahab the harlot. Most every time she is mentioned, we are given this phrase, Rahab the harlot. And we're made to wonder, I guess, at this point, we might as well address, why are these 2 men of valor seen going into the house of a harlot? It does not seem appropriate for 2 men representing the people of God to go into a city they're about to overthrow and go into an harlot. Well, there are many reasons why it might be so. One of the things I read about this is in the Hebrew, the word for harlot can also be translated as innkeeper. This being the case, either way, they think that she would have probably had a place near the front gate, so that as they came in, she had an inn indeed, they would be able to go there and lodge, and whatever her business might be, it was taken care of from that point. I think maybe she did have some kind of inn or lodge associated there, because she's told to bring your whole family into your room, your place, and everyone that's inside your house will be saved. Well, her mother and father and brothers and sisters and all of their families stay in her house. Now, not many houses would accommodate that many people, so perhaps there is reason to believe that she was an innkeeper, but I think it's very obvious that from the way the word is used, they intended for us to get the idea that she was indeed a harlot, that was a part of what she's doing. Almost every time her name is mentioned, she's called Rahab the harlot. That is, except the account in Matthew where he's relating the genealogy of Christ. There she's simply called Rahab by name. So she takes in the spies, and somehow the king finds out almost immediately that they are there. One wonders how they found out so quickly. Perhaps if she did have some type of inn, there was someone there who recognized them as foreigners, and when foreigners came into the land, it was a red flag immediately. So they're going to tell the king about these 2 men who have come in. Perhaps they have even heard enough of the conversation to know where they are from, and that they are part of those people, that they are dreadful of their coming. Also, if this is the case, it explains why Rahab was prepared when the king's messengers came back. If she saw these men leave, maybe she knew what they were going to do, that they were going to go and warn the king about her men, the two men who are here staying with her. So she is prepared, but along the way she has a very interesting conversation. Joshua chapter 2, verses 9 through 12. She says, I know that the Lord has given you the land, that the terror of you has fallen on us, and on all the inhabitants of the land that are faint-hearted because of you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the two kings of the Amorites who were on the other side of the Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. And as soon as we heard these things, our hearts melted. Neither did there remain any more courage in anyone because of you. For the Lord your God, He is God in heaven above and on earth beneath. Notice she said three things there in particular to me. We heard about your crossing the Red Sea and how it dried up. Some liberal scholars for decades try to tell us that it was not really a miracle that the Israelites actually crossed the Reed Sea, which is only about ankle deep. Tell that to the people of Jericho. They heard about them crossing on dry land, and it was so miraculous that it struck fear in their hearts. It said God was with them. The Lord your God, He is God of heaven and on the earth as well. She heard about what God did, this great miracle that He did. And they were so impressed with that. But then follow that up, we heard about what happened to Sihon and Og. Numbers 21 and 24. Then Israel defeated him with the edge of the sword and took possession of his land. All they asked was to march through his land. They were going to stay on the king's highway. He wouldn't permit it. And he came out to attack them. So they instead attacked him with the edge of the sword, and they took all of his land. This was what bothered the city of Jericho, that Og was defeated, that Sihon was defeated, and then Og also defeated. Numbers 21:35, they defeated him, his sons, and all his people, till there was no survivor left them, and they took possession of his land. So Sihon and Og both were defeated, their people destroyed, their land taken, and the people in Jericho know enough to know Israel's coming here too. Isn't it amazing how that the people of Canaan knew about the promise of God to the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? They knew that these people had left Egypt and they were headed to the land of Canaan. And it struck fear in their heart. They were filled with dread. It's amazing to me sometimes how those who are not God's people know and understand things that seems like sometimes God's people take for granted, or at least don't take as seriously as they ought to. These people, it says, that their hearts melted. They're afraid, and their courage has left. They want no part of this. But they know that's what's coming. Rahab and her household are saved. She makes a bargain, the spy's life for hers. She's going to let them down. We'll talk about in just a second that she's going to let them down out of the city, save their life. And when they come back to destroy the city, she and her family, all in her house, are going to be saved. But not only is she saved, but she becomes a part of Israel. She later marries Salmon. She becomes the mother of Boaz. She becomes a mother-in-law of Ruth. She is in the lineage of Christ. So she's quite a story. She's quite a story. So let's move now to the battle. Let's talk about what actually transpired in the falling of the walls of Jericho. I find it very, very interesting. It's well known. You know the story well. But let's take a look at it. Joshua is told to go and to take the city, and he's told how to do that. Jericho is a walled city. It has gates. The gates are closed and locked because of Israel. They know about them. They know they're coming, and so they have locked up their gates. And that's not a problem, because these people also know that Well, they're prepared. They have a water supply, a fresh water supply. Harvest has just passed. When they go back and excavate this land, they find pots that are full of grain. Harvest has just passed, so they are full of food. They could have lasted literally for months if someone had tried to besiege them. So they are prepared for that with their gates closed, and they are ready. But to try to give you an idea of just how great a challenge this is, the walls going up seemingly into the heavens. It is said that they had these huge walls, but not only these huge walls were there, but there was a mound up against the wall. You'll remember we're told that Rahab, her house is up on the wall. Some say even the back of her house would have been a part of the wall. This is why she could let them down out the back, out a window, and all the way down to the ground, and they're on the side where there's a mountain, so they run to the mountain and they escape and they hide there for 2 or 3 days until people are no longer looking for them. But the walls are big enough that a house could be built up on top of or back against those walls. And then as you come down that mountain, a secondary wall has been constructed with dirt thrown up between the two of those. So I have a picture. You cannot really see the picture. It's kind of blurry as I've blown it way up. But all you do is get a look at this if you can. As you can see, the main wall is here and the smaller wall is down here with brick reinforcing at the bottom. And then you have the dirt mound placed up against it. So anyone that's going to overtake it must go over the smaller wall at the bottom. They have to go up the mound of dirt, very steep, to the top of the wall, which if you were standing outside the bottom wall, looking up to the top of the wall of Jericho, you'd be looking at a height of 48 foot. So that's an obstacle that seems like it's just almost to overcome. If you're Israel and you're looking at, well, how are you going to take it? You can't round the walls and knock them down. You can't climb over the wall. How are you going to get in? How are you going to overcome this great obstacle? Well, God says we're going to do it by marching around it for 7 days. So the battle plan is that we're going to take trumpets and we're going to have a parade and we're going to march around the city for 6 days. And each day they're going to blow the trumpets. They're going to march around the walls. Can you imagine what the people of Jericho felt like? Remember, they know who was out there. They've heard about them. Their hearts have melted. They're full of fear and terror. They don't have any courage. Their knees are weak. They have no stomach for war or battle. But these people seem to be taunting them. They're just going around and round the walls, marching one time, each day walking around it and then disappearing back from whence they came. 6 days they do that. On the 7th day, they march around the walls as they've done before. The horns blow, and now then they all shout, and when they do so, the walls fall. Well, if the walls are 48 foot high and they tumble, how does Israel get inside the city, across and over all that debris? They still have a problem. Well, if you look at the text, it says the walls fell flat, and every man went in straight. So each one from where they were at were able to walk straight in. As the bricks, the blocks fall down, they go down, they fill the space between the walls, and they leave, as it were, a path they could crawl up and over and into the city. Some say that the walls fell because of an earthquake. Earthquakes were known to be common in the land. Matter of fact, some say that the water backed up because of an earthquake when they crossed the Jordan. The water just stopped and it backed up from that point as they crossed over. And that is possible. You see, God can do whatever He chooses and use whatever He chooses to do it with. So if God chose to use a natural phenomenon as an earthquake, It is said that two earlier accounts were that it caused the walls, the rock, the cliffs to fall into the water, so much so that it made a dam. In one case, I believe it was 13 hours held the wall, and the second time it was a much greater time, I believe 27 hours, something like that. Twice earthquakes caused the water to stop flowing. So they were familiar with that, but what makes it a miracle is God knew when it was going to happen. He told them to touch the water and be prepared to cross. So when they were ready, then they crossed. There's nothing said about them shaking or falling because of an earthquake, but they did cross. And God could have used an earthquake to make the walls of Jericho fall. If He so desired, God can do it any way He chooses. He's not limited in how He does what He chooses to do. So if there was an earthquake, it is still miraculous. The miracle is that it happened exactly when and how God chose. God told them for 7 days you march around. On the seventh day, you blow your horns, you shout, and then the victory was going to be there. So God told them exactly when the walls would fall. It fell at God's command, regardless of what God used to make the walls fall. But they fall down, they fill in, and Israel's able to go across that, go in. It is said that they destroyed every man, woman, and child. They completely tore the city down. They burned the city. When archaeology has gone back and did their discovery of the land, they found most things there were burned. If you do some reading about this, you'll find there's some discrepancies people have. Most time the discrepancies were answered and overcome easily with time. To see that everything happened exactly the way that God said that it was to be done. Now, when the city was burned, its inhabitants were destroyed, all except Rahab and her family. And then the gold, the silver, the bronze, and all the valuables were to be taken into the Lord's treasury, Joshua 6, verse 24. So the Hebrew writer says this all happened by faith. The walls of Jericho fell down after they were encircled for 7 days, and by faith the Rahab harlot did not perish. Interesting story. It says the walls fell by faith, men marching around cities without weapons, simply blowing horns and marching, and walls falling before them. A woman who has heard of their coming and believes enough in what's about to happen that she gives them safety, and that her faith is demonstrated by protecting them and letting them go. So now, that's a story, if you will, of the walls of Jericho, the demonstration of faith. But our exercise is to compare our faith to the faith demonstrated there. So as you examine yourself, tell me, this is one of those things I like to do, who in this story do you see yourself most like? Whose faith is most like yours? Or is your faith most like someone in the story? If we're looking at what happened and we're trying to draw a lesson about faith, the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. If we've been studying faith all this quarter and we've been trying to build up our faith by these things that are told, that by faith these people did great things, and here it's a great battle, which was just the beginning. This is the entrance to the land of Canaan. They get courage and they march forward, and they go from place to place, and they inherit the land of Canaan. They dispossess. They run out all the people that were there before them. So, whose faith is most like yours in the story? Are you most like Joshua? He's a valiant leader. Moses trained him. Are you in training? Do you see your faith as being one that is growing, that you are taking on obstacles? You're being given jobs to do. Either God's putting things in your plate, in your way, and you're working through that so that your faith is growing, it's becoming stronger. With each and every victory you have, you're growing and you're becoming mightier in what you are doing. Are you becoming a leader that's ready to do the Lord's bidding when the time comes? Joshua's faith started a long time before he was the leader of Israel. His demonstration of faith was long before he became the leader of Israel. It's just in this case, he was given a wall to overcome. Are there walls in your life that need to be overcome? Is your faith strong enough to overcome those walls? Can you see that God is planning great things for you? Maybe not. Maybe you don't see the walls yet. Maybe you don't see where God is leading you. Maybe you don't see what's in your future. Most of us can't see the future. Or maybe you do. Maybe you already see the walls. Do you have faith to climb the walls, to go over the walls and claim the victory for God? This was not about Joshua. This was not a victory for Joshua. This is a victory for God. God is driving out the people of Jericho, and that's what the battle was about. And your faith needs to grow in leadership so that you can claim great victories for God. Or are you a Rahab? You say, oh, I'm offended by that. No. I believe Rahab maybe demonstrates the greatest faith of all in this story. Consider who she was, where she was. But she had enough faith that when confronted by two men from the nation that was ultimately going to destroy the whole city, take the whole land, I believe she knew all of that. And yet she chose to put her lot with them. She protected them from the king, although it might have cost her her life. She helped them escape. And then she became a part of these people, these Israelites. She was not an Israelite. She was an outsider. But she became a part of them and became a part of the genealogy of Christ. God can do great things with you. You may have to overcome your past. There may be some things that you need to work on, but by faith, Rahab, the harlot, became the ancestor of the Savior of the world. It's not where you've been that counts, it's where you're going. Is your faith great enough to get you to where you need to go? And then, of course, the faith of the spies. Going into a land where at any moment they could have been killed. It's not a very safe job to be a spy. And as they go into this land and they go into this city, they're looking for them. They could have been killed. They had enough faith to do what needed to be done. Do you have enough faith to do what needs to be done? The story doesn't quite close there. One last little thing. I said after the fall of the walls of Jericho, they marched from victory to victory, except not quite. The next battle was a defeat at Ai, because there's a fellow there by the name of Achan. Achan did take some of the silver and a wedge of gold and a Babylonian garment, which he was told not to take. And because he did so, you know that's a story for another day, but because he did so, they suffered defeat. The army suffered defeat because of his decision. You see, great faith not only enables us to do great things that need to be done, but sometimes great faith will allow us to abstain from doing that which is forbidden. So how's your faith? Is your faith great enough to lead? Is your faith great enough to overcome? Is your faith great enough to overcome your past? Is your faith great enough to take on things that you feel perhaps dangerous for you? Is your faith great enough to abstain from doing things that God says you ought not to do? Hope you've enjoyed the lesson. Hope it's beneficial and profitable. Hope the whole study's been beneficial and profitable. We are here for you. If you're watching this, you're not a member of our family, if we can help you, we do hope that you will contact us and let us know how we might help you. We want to be helpful. If you're a member of our family and you have a need that we're not aware of, please make us aware of that. Keep studying God's Word. Keep growing in your faith, and may you be an example to other people. Thank you.